We're back. Here's what that fight over the fiscal cliff in Washington comes down to. The president and the Democrats say the wealthy should pay a little more, while the Republicans say the wealthy already pay too much. Let them keep their money and they'll create jobs for the rest of us, they say. Well, a little historic perspective shows why the Republican argument is false. And veteran journalist Hedrick Smith offers that perspective in his new book, Who Stole the American Dream? In the last 40 years, for example, the middle class has been squeezed financially, don't have to tell you that, and sidelined politically. The average worker's salary has remained flat and the retirement security has largely disappeared. We're talking about 401s here. But the pay for CEOs has skyrocketed from, catch this, from 40 times the salary of the average company worker in 1980 to 400 times it by 2000. All this was made possible, Mr. Smith argues, thanks to powerful corporate interests in Washington, which have shifted the balance of power politically. Hedrick Smith joins us now. Rick, thank you so much for coming in. I'm going to let you make your message without a lot of Q&A here. What is the kernel of what you've discovered in your reporting about how people have been squeezed because they know they've been squeezed?
Chris, everybody tells us that the middle class has been squeezed because of globalization and technology, because of market forces, impersonal forces. But when I dug into this and started to look back into it, what I found out was what really happened back when you and I met, when you were working for Tip O'Neill as Speaker of the House. That was when there was a power shift. Lewis Powell, who was a corporate attorney, named to the Supreme Court by Richard Nixon, actually wrote a memo and said, we're getting killed, business is getting killed politically by the environmental movement, by the labor movement, by the women's movement, by the consumer movement, Ralph Nader and those guys. And he said, business, you got to organize. You got to get to Washington. You got to take the high ground. And sure enough, literally within months, the Business Roundtable was formed, biggest, most powerful voice of corporate America today and back then. National Association of Manufacturers moved their headquarters to Washington. There were 175 companies when Powell wrote his memo that had lobbying offices in Washington. Several years later, there were 2,400, 50,000 people working for business trade associations. There was a political rebellion, and they absolutely stuffed labor. They stuffed the consumer movement. They got deregulation. They got tax cuts. They got all kinds of things. So the power shift tilted the policy towards business, towards the wealthy. That started in the late 70s, literally when you and I were there. And at the same time, you had what I call wedge economics in the economy. Used to be that the prosperity, the growth of American productivity was shared. Middle class had its share along with the owners, along with the shareholders. The productivity of the American workforce, it doubled from 1945 to 1975.
So I know a lot about this, but give us there's Gucci Gulch where all the lawyers and lobbyists come in and tell us how to write tax policy. A lot of businesses actually write the bills. They draft them for the Republican and sometimes Democrat. Talk about that, how that works, because I don't think the public knows some of that.
They're absolutely right in there doing exactly what you're saying. And they started out by doing it. They wrote the 401k. It was never intended to be a national retirement plan. It was stuck into the legislation by Barbara Conable, an upstate New York Republican, as a favor to Xerox and Kodak because they had their head offices in his home district. And what they wanted was a tax shelter for retirement payments to their executives. That's how it started. They wrote it. It was 401k because it's 401 provisions down in the tax code, and then it's all the way down to K. It was so small, nobody even knew it was there. You guys didn't know it was there. The Speaker didn't know it was there.
So instead of having a solid pension with a guaranteed annuity coming to you, you have 401ks, which have shrunk in many cases over the years.
Well, what you got is hundreds of billions of dollars of expenditures are shifted from the corporate books into the pocketbooks and the wallets of ordinary people. And it's a disaster. The average 401k balance today is $18,000. That median 401k balance for people on the verge of retirement after 20 years in the 401k is only $85,000. So the corporations have saved enormous amounts of money, and the people are spending, having to spend a lot more money, and they're not saving enough.
We have to have you back again and again. This is great stuff. Thank you, because a lot of our progressive viewers have a hunch about this. They don't know the details. Thank you so much, because they know the squeeze is real. Rick Smith, Hedrick Smith, the book's called Who Stole the American Dream? I think this is required reading, and I never say that.